Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about how Lance Barber, the actor who plays George Cooper on Young Sheldon, has proven once and for all, forever, in my humble opinion, that ever using a backup character in any Dungeons and Dragons character, in any Dungeons and Dragons game, is bad dungeon mastering and or bad dragon mastering. All right, so I use the term Dragon Master. It means Dungeons and Dragons player. So every time I say Dragon Master, I mean Dungeons and Dragons player, somebody who runs a player character, okay? Which I call a Dragon Master character. All right, let's jump into this. So there's been this debate, right? And I got into this debate, and I'll put the link below for the debate. There's this debate on Twitter, and people were like, "Oh, you have to have my dungeon." Here's how it started on Twitter. Someone on Twitter was like, "I told my players, you need a backup character for this game," and one of my one of my players was like, "Oh, my character's just useless. There's really no value in me playing in this." He said different words, but immediately one of the player characters was like, "Oh, this is that kind of game? Like, you're just going to cut me down and my character means nothing, and why am I even here?" Right? Like, they said it in different words. I think that's what they were saying. The player immediately threw a flag. It was like, "What? Wait, you want a backup character?" And they're like, "Listen, nobody needs to worry about backup characters. It's not that big a deal. It's just I don't want you to sit at the table, right, and have nothing to do." And so I immediately came back and said, "You're a bad dungeon master." If any dungeon master who asks for a backup character is fundamentally, unequivocally a bad dungeon master. And any dragon master who ever makes a backup character is a bad dragon master and really doesn't belong at the table, because they're not valuing anything that's happening there. They're saying your player character sheet is an interchangeable piece of paper that means nothing, and I want to make sure that you have another interchangeable, valueless piece of paper, because if you don't, you might actually stop for a minute to think about the death of that character. And then there might be an intellectual processing, an emotional processing, and a spiritual processing of the death of a valuable identity. And this backup character is a shield to make sure that no one at this table ever needs to learn, grow, think, change, transform, or feel anything uncomfortable. The backup character is the badge of the bad dungeon master, the badge of the bad dragon master. So how do we now know this for sure, in my humble opinion? Well, Lance Barber. So spoilers for season 7 of Young Sheldon. At the end of season 7 of Young Sheldon, George Cooper dies, okay? And his character actually dies. And so Lance Barber plays George Cooper. So Young Sheldon's father passes away, dies in the show, right? And here's how you know that the backup character is the guarantee of bad dungeon master, the guarantee of bad dragon master. How do we know it? How do we land there? How do we get this information that, basically here, if you are a dungeon master or a dragon master, right, and your dungeon master asks for a backup character, run for the hills. It's a bad dungeon master. He does not know he or she does not know what she's doing. Untalented, uncommitted. Okay? How do we know that? How do we know that they're untalented and uncommitted, right? Here we go. Lance Barber proves it, okay? So how does Lance Barber prove this point? It's really fascinating. So Lance Barber said, so first of all, he did not make a backup character. He had been on Young Sheldon for 7 seasons, right? And he had enough pull at this point with the producers. This is connected to Big Bang Theory. They're making literally there are billions of dollars on the line, right? Hundreds of millions at minimum already. And just from what we know of Friends, of The Office, of Big Bang Theory, which is one of the most valuable shows on television, you're talking about billions of dollars. So this guy has made it, right? And he could have said, listen, when George Cooper dies, I don't want to just sit around and not do anything for work. So you make a hot dog vendor, and I'll wear a mustache, And everybody will know it's me, because really George Cooper was a worthless character that didn't really matter. And so let's make sure that I'm on the show as a hot dog vendor and young Sheldon buys a hot dog from me. That way I can continue to act on the stage, even though George Cooper has already died, right? He could have made a backup character. He could have went to the producers. He could have went to the directors. He could have went to the writers and said, listen, make sure that there's not a single day where I'm not acting on set, right? Make a hot dog vendor, and young Sheldon will buy a hot dog from me, and I'll wink at the camera and go, wink, wink, right? George Cooper's dead, but who cares? It wasn't a valuable character anyway. Nobody needed to pay attention. It wasn't an important part of the narrative. I'm right here, everybody, and the important part was that I got to keep acting. That's the entire point. You know what Lance Barber did? He said, when I had shot my death scene the day before, I didn't show on the set because I thought that my physical absence would help the other actors and actresses to feel the loss of George Cooper. That's the proof. You must let your Dungeons & Dragons character die, and you must experience it intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually, right? And everybody at that table, not only are we wrong to be rushing in to make sure that literally not even 15 minutes is lost and that player is playing a new character. What that says is that the old character meant nothing and the new character meant nothing. And guess what? That means every character at the table, every Dungeon Master character, every Dragon Master character is worthless, because there's not a good Dungeon Master at the table and there's not a good Dragon Master at the table. Lance Barber showed it. So what he's saying is that if your Dungeons & Dragons character dies, you get up from the table and you leave, and you go home and you weep for what you lost, and you let everybody there feel the weight of it, and you do not return to that table until they have resurrected you. Or weeks later, there is some other solution, right? And so he's saying that if you understand the value of a character, you shut your flapping maw, you get up from the table, you carefully put that dead character in your folder, and you go home and you process it intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And you allow your physical absence at the table to let everyone else understand the value of what you all built together. Or you do what Seth Skorkowsky told you to do, and you make sure that none of that happens, because you're actually a bad Dungeon Master, or you're a bad Dragon Master. You now know, and you have the choice. Are you building nothing that can be replaced within less than 15 minutes, and you're the hot dog vendor, and you wear the mustache, and you go, wink, wink, people, I'm still here, because the character I made before didn't matter, and this one certainly doesn't either. All we're doing here is cutting goblins in half, and we have no hope of ever learning anything from Gary Gygax's legacy. Or you do what Lance Barber did. The death roll fails. You seal your flapping maw, you put your character sheet up, you get up from the table, and you drive home, and you take no calls for the night, right? And you let people feel the incredible weight of the loss of what you built. And then you, over days, weeks, or months, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually process the death of that player character that mattered. And the next one you can bet is going to matter too, because you took the time to let it, just like Lance Barber did. Every single word you just heard is nothing more than my humble opinion. What's important is when I get to your humble opinion, when you get in the comments and send your traffic. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a fetch millennium.